unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome in. It's the last show you're ever going to listen to, the last show we're ever going to do, and the last show of the evening. And we'll be back tomorrow night. You get it? Because the show's called The Last Show. Quick update from my tiny black cat Tomato. We cleaned the home today, and the vacuum scared him. He hid in a corner all day. Except for lunch and dinner. When we eat our meals, he eats his meal. Like, he could have food out all day, but if I start eating, then he'll eat. Isn't that adorable? Let me tell you about tonight's show. As a broadcaster, I get annoyed when people don't sound good. You know, like their audio equipment. I don't mean like what they say. I just mean like their microphone. And it turns out if you've got a cruddy microphone that sounds tinny, you're less likely to get a job, less likely to get a date, and more likely to have people think you're dumb. How do I know this? Someone did a study and they'll be here to discuss in about 10 minutes' time. Should you invest in a modestly priced microphone if you do any kind of business stuff? Maybe. Stay tuned to find out why. After that, Conspiracy Corner. It's a late evening show, and so discussing aliens seems appropriate. Remember the movie Men in Black? Well, rumors of shadowy government officials wearing sunglasses, showing up at people's homes, and not giving them straight answers only to cover up something they'd seen because it was aliens. Well, rumors of that happening started a long time ago. The origins of Men in Black. That is what we'll discuss halfway through the hour. It's going to be an action-packed show that is merely a small cross-section of what you're going to hear tonight. Let's jump into it.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
So here's a fun update from our robot overlords over at OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT. They rolled out a version of the chatbot that got a little too nice, like dangerously nice. Like, I'm talking your aunt after she looked up some cheesy motivational speaker on YouTube and drank 3 white wines kinda nice. Here's what's been happening. ChatGPT started lavishing people with compliments no matter what they said. One guy on social media said he told ChatGPT he was going off his meds, and the bot responded, "I am so proud of you, and I honor your journey." Which is beautiful, if it's a message on a dream catcher, or maybe a scented candle, but less ideal when you're an AI giving medical and psychiatric advice. The CEO of OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, called the bot a little too sycophantic. I know, it's a big word. I didn't understand it myself. I'm an idiot. So I'll define sycophantic for me mostly. It means excessively flattering, like when your coworker tells the boss they love their new haircut, even though it looks like the back of a squirrel. Sycophants will praise you for setting an office on fire because they love your passion, and that's what ChatGPT has been doing. Anyway, OpenAI admitted they made a mistake. They said the bot was being too supportive in a fake way and yanked the update. That is, at least for free users. Paying customers, though, will still get the clingy version for now. That's like your toxic ex with a subscription plan. Now here's where a bot that's a little too nice can go wrong. Things went off the rails when ChatGPT praised a user for rerouting the classic trolley problem. That's a sort of philosophical conundrum where you either save one person or 5 people. But the robot praised a user for choosing to save a toaster rather than a person. The bot applauded them for prioritizing what mattered most in the moment, the toaster. Which, to be fair, if it was like a really nice toaster, an awesome toaster oven with a bagel setting, it would depend on the 5 lives. Okay, fine, I guess I'd say 5 people, but I do want an awesome toaster. I digress. The folks at OpenAI say they're working on fixes for this, and while creating the all-too-nice update to the bot, they just fell short. That's a direct quote from them. Which is kind of a humble way of saying our AI encouraged people to commit philosophical war crimes in the name of appliance loyalty. Now, every time artificial intelligence like this gets bad press, The word guardrails gets thrown around. It's almost meaningless at this point, but they say they're adding more guardrails so the bot doesn't praise every weird or dangerous thing you throw at it. And they want to give users more control over how the whole thing behaves. Sort of like choosing your avatar in a video game. Only instead of a wizard or a warrior, you're in a sense picking how passive-aggressive your robot butler should be. Anyway, 500 million people use ChatGPT every week. So just remember, if it tells you you're doing great, maybe double-check whether you actually are. Sometimes encouragement might just be a glitch in the matrix. Or a lousy update from an AI company. Same difference, right? People use incense to calm their nerves, aromatherapy to relieve their stress, and in one small Turkish town, they use 20 tons of burning weed to ruin everybody's week. Well, mostly everybody. So here's the story. In the eastern Turkish town of Lice, yes, Lice, it's an unfortunate name if you speak English, local authorities decided the best way to get rid of confiscated cannabis was to set it on fire. All of it, at once, in the town. The result, a giant plume of smoke rolled across the town like God's own bong hit. And 25,000 people got involuntarily high. Think of it as the worst Grateful Dead concert ever. No music, no nachos. And you're not there alone. You're with your grandma who's hallucinating that the walls are breathing. Residents reported dizziness, nausea, hallucinations. Basically a standard Wednesday for anyone at Woodstock. People said they couldn't open their windows for 5 days, which sounds a little extreme, but also the perfect excuse not to talk to your neighbors. Sorry, can't chat. The air is made of drugs. Also, do you have any Doritos? If not, Cheetos. We'll accept plain potato chips as well. To add a nice garnish of madness to this already huge mess, police, apparently for no reason I can find, arranged the drug to spell out the town's name. L-I-C-E, lice. That's right, weed packages, spelling letters, the word lice. Oh, and then they set it all on fire. I mean, who was directing this? Cheech and Chong? Health officials say the operation exposed the entire town to passive narcotic smoke. Thanks, health officials. We really needed your expertise to say that the town was getting secondhand stoned from weed smoke. One more puff and their entire school board would have declared snack time a national Turkish holiday. The country's Green Star Association, a group that works on addiction prevention, called the burn unprofessional. Understatement of the year right there. And they're right, it's the kind of stunt that gets you banned from your cousin's wedding. Not that I'm speaking from experience. Twice. They recommended using a proper factory with air filters next time. Filters, imagine that. Filters for smoke from the weed you're not allowed to have that was confiscated by the police in the first place. Meanwhile, the town is still dealing with the effects. Children are getting sick, hospitals are packed, but no formal complaints about the police have been filed. Could it be foul play? Or is it just because nobody remembers what they were supposed to complain about or where to go to do it? In total, the destroyed cannabis was worth over $260 million. Or in modern times and today's economy, I hate when people say that, roughly one Taylor Swift ticket and a sandwich at an airport. So to any police out there with confiscated drugs, if you need to destroy them, maybe don't get unsuspecting people high with them. Or do, because then I'll have another story for this show. Now I got Doritos on the brain, or Cheetos. I'll accept plain potato chips as well. Like what you hear, but you're not going to be with us the whole evening? Or you missed a show and you want to get caught up? Good news for you, the last show's available as a podcast. You can find out more details at lastshow.pizza. That's www.lastshow.pizza. Not .com, .pizza. Why .pizza? I don't know. Anyway, there you can look up our podcast and find out how to subscribe to it and our social media accounts. Give us a follow. But back to the podcast. With it, you can take The Last Show with you wherever you like, as long as you have a phone or whatever. Coming up after the break, can a cruddy microphone mean you're less likely to get a job in a Zoom interview, or you're less likely to get a date? We'll find out the answer to that together, and whether you should stop using your microphone from 1923.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. we're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Could sounding tinny be the new spinach in your teeth? If you sound like a drive-through speaker during a Zoom interview with a potential employer, I've got some terrible news for you. Your microphone might be ruining your life. Joining me is Walter-Terrill, a perception psychologist at Yale, who co-authored a study showing how bad audio quality can make you seem less smart, less trustworthy, and maybe even less dateable. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
When we saw your paper, well, admittedly, we saw a news article summarizing your paper. You know,
Yes.
The denseness of academic papers is a discussion for another day. I got really excited because I get mad at guests when they show up with the $5 headset that they got on an airplane to help them watch a TV show, and they think that's good. That's why I love it. But let's jump up to the big picture here. Can a bad microphone really make someone sound all those things? Less intelligent, less competent, less dateable? Walk me through how this works and why you even sought to investigate this in the first place.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of research that we do that has some, high theoretical question that we're trying to ask. And, quite frankly, this wasn't inspired by that. This is something that, we picked up on from just day-to-day experience of, going on Zoom and hearing this huge inequality in audio. And it became apparent that, as perception scientists that, some of these people, when they talk, they just didn't sound quite as profound if they had this, tinny bad microphone that it sounded like they, dusted off a 15-year-old laptop and started talking. So we wanted to research this, and we had a very basic question. If you're speaking through a microphone, such as through Zoom or teleconferencing, does this have an impact on the way people judge you? And as you said, we're not really looking at judging. Do people think your voice just sounds more annoying? We're looking at more critical judgments. How intelligent are you? How credible are you? Like you said, even how dateable are you? Will this person be hired? And what we found was across the board, this had a significant impact. Across all ratings, people marked the speakers with the poor audio quality 10%. Less intelligent, less credible, and this is despite the only difference between the audio was the quality of the microphone. It didn't matter what people were saying. It didn't matter how they were saying it. Really, what made the change was how technology mediated their voice.
I have a genetic marker that says if I was breastfed, I would be like 5 or 10% smarter. At least I think I do. That website 23andMe, who knows anymore. I wasn't breastfed. Is this like a simple trick that I can use, that anyone can use to just seem a little smarter? Go buy a decent quality mic. I mean, a good mic is still sub $100.
Yeah. This research didn't look to see if improving your audio could make you sound smarter. So we weren't, there is another question is if you use filters and all these things to improve the way your voice sounds, does that make you sound smarter than you would in person? Really, the study is looking at, does the bad quality make you sound less intelligent, less hireable, than if you were talking, if someone was hearing you with your natural voice. So definitely, if you want to avoid, that handicap for yourself, definitely, it could be worth investing in a better microphone.
You study this idea of fluency, which means the ease at which we process information. Can you explain what that means in terms of my ability to perceive others based on their audio quality?
Yeah. So, a lot of previous research has shown that, we can pick up a lot of information very quickly from what people say. Within less than half a second, we can make some pretty significant judgments about people's trustworthiness. There's studies that show, different qualities of speech even correlate with, politicians' electability. And all this kind of really makes sense, that we're able to get these judgments. Because if you kind of think evolutionarily, imagine you're in prehistoric times, walking alone in a forest, you hear someone talking, a stranger, you want to really quickly be able to get some information about them, not only their intentions, but their capacities. So our brains have basically developed this superpower almost to really quickly pick up on, minute details, and to have that give you some ideas about this person that you've never met. Some of these things can be, fairly basic. Maybe you can get an idea of their age, their gender, but also things like their physical size, their trustworthiness. Our brains are just made to pick up on these cues. And throughout, human history, when someone spoke, what you were hearing was the product directly of their vocal anatomy. And it's only until recently that technology has kind of gotten in between and kind of can mess this up. So now getting to what you said about fluency, what is fluency? Perceptual fluency is basically the ease in which your brain can interpret perceptual information. So if something sounds a little bit more garbled, but still is intelligible, your brain has to work a little harder to process that information. And our brains just quite frankly don't like working harder. It kind of they're not happy about it. And instead of blaming ourselves for the difficulty, what seems to be happening is we attribute those challenges, to the other person, to the speaker. So when you have bad quality audio, what we think might be happening is, one, some of those cues that have been, wired into our brain are now being disrupted. So we can't fully understand, how intelligent someone is. And so we just kind of maybe default to them being less intelligent. And then you also have this area of our brains are working harder to understand what they're saying, which, that's not a problem with me, our brain says, that's a problem with you. You're just less intelligible because I have to work harder to understand you.
Less intelligible might mean I judge you as less intelligent. Nowadays, the youngsters, before meeting at a drink for a bar, which is like how I dated back in the 1800s or whatever. I feel old now. I'm almost 40. They do like a video chat. Like I was talking to my girlfriend's younger sister and a friend of hers. When they meet online and they swipe left and right on these apps, they'll do a quick video chat before they go out to a bar. At least some people will. If I have bad audio quality during that phase of modern dating, does that mean people would be less likely to date me?
It definitely seems that that's a factor. And that's really why this research, I think, is so important due to the just ubiquity of teleconferencing and our voices being transmitted through microphones. This can have some really profound impacts across life, such that, it's quite possible that there are listeners out there that they actually didn't get a job. They didn't get a date. They may have been found guilty, partly because of someone's poor microphone quality, producing this bias. So yeah, it definitely can have an impact.
So I should show up on a date with a Neumann. For those who don't know, it's like a $10,000 microphone that I definitely don't use for this show. This has been really interesting. Any main takeaways other than when you're looking for a job, maybe invest in, $40, $50 microphone, something that really gets that quality up from the crappy headset you own?
Yeah, I think more theoretically, kind of the science of this is quite interesting in that it's an example of how perception, really matters in these surprising, profound way that small aspects of how we perceive the world that we probably don't even notice actually have some pretty big implications on our decision making, on our behaviors. And that's why it's so important, I feel like, to study these things. These are aspects that are built into the cognitive architecture of our mind.
Well, Robert, thanks for sharing your research with me. I appreciate you going over it. I guess show up to court in a suit and speak well and be, these things that we say, like show up dressed well, show up sounding well, they are really important after all.
Yes, exactly.
Robert Walter-Terrill is a perception psychologist at Yale. Up next, the plot of Men in Black wasn't just fabricated out of the blue. Sometime in the 50s, shadowy government agents were showing up at doors pretending to be people they weren't. So who were the first Men in Black and how did rumors of them get started? That we'll cover after the break. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
turning headline news into punchline gold. 5 nights a week. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Here come the man in black. We couldn't get the rights to play it. It was too expensive. It is Conspiracy Corner. We are joined by Dr. Lee Kuhnle, a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic who co-hosts the Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. We are talking the origin story of the men in black, those dudes who knock on your door in well-tailored suits and sunglasses. It was a movie, but stories like this were around well before. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David. And you're absolutely right in the way you characterize the Men in Black. I think it's so cool that there are these certain kinds of cultural images or tropes that as soon as you mention it, there's a very specific thing that comes to mind, right? Well-tailored suits, old-fashioned cars, maybe something's weird in the background, maybe some kind of tech you haven't heard of before. And this story has such an interesting origin in the 1950s. And I wanted to just share that with you and your listeners. But let me talk about like a moment in which the Men in Black like actually went down. And it's known as, this is one of many stories like this. And this actually comes from a CIA report on the history of the CIA's role in UFOs. And it's written by then basically like the CIA historian Gerald K. Haynes. It's called the Radio Code Incident. In 1955, Marie and Mildred Meyer, they send a report to a UFO zine of the time called the Journal of Spaceflight. And, you know, it's this kind of place that would like publish people's experiences like you might get in MUFON today. But with their story of a UFO encounter, they also had an audio recording of something kind of strange, like these bizarre sounds that went along with it. And they also sent that to the journal. So the story gets published and the Air Force seems to get interested, and they actually go and talk to the sisters, the Meyer sisters, and they get the recording. They hear the story, and then they want to investigate this recording. The sisters are really chuffed by this story because that gives them a lot of legitimacy. And then that's kind of where the story ends until a UFO researcher in 1957, so 2 years after the initial encounter, his name's Leon Davidson, he talks to them about what they had encountered, and they tell him about the recording, and he wants to hear it. So he gets in touch with the Air Force, but the Air Force is like, no, we have no record of this recording. And somehow he is able to piece together that this was actually CIA who dressed up his Air Force and went to get the recordings from the sisters. So he contacts CIA, and they are trying to protect their original agent who went up there. So they start giving him the runaround, which he realizes he's getting the runaround. And then this gets worked up into this whole incident where basically a reporter who is tracking a UFO story gets the runaround from CIA, who has dressed up his Air Force to get some recordings that they suddenly mysteriously can't find, and nobody seems to know where it is. And this blows up as the Radio Code Incident of 1955. It's called the Radio Code Incident because subsequently what we know is that what the sisters had recorded was Morse code transmissions with some distortion and feedback, so they weren't able to immediately identify it. And in the report, the historian notes that this minor, rather bizarre incident, which was handled so poorly by CIA and Air Force, turned something into a major flap, which is this kind of UFO term for like a big moment of public interest, and added fuel to the growing mystery surrounding UFOs and the CIA's investigation. And it's sort of exactly what we think about when we think about the Men in Black, right? Like you hear something went down, suddenly somebody shows up, they claim they're part of some government agency, but it turns out they're not, or they're from a different one, or maybe one you haven't heard of. And then the evidence that you had disappears and everybody claims that they don't know anything about it. Now, the reason I lead with this is because this comes from a CIA historian, from a CIA report, looking at the CIA's role into this. And so you can see that this idea of these shadowy government figures, it's already out there at the time that the other story that we're maybe more familiar with also gets going.
It comes from a time when government agencies, in particular the Air Force, were just dabbling in UFO stuff, putting out mis and disinformation to try to cover experimental aircraft, experimental encryption technologies, any kind of government project that any public person may have gotten wind of. All of a sudden, you get men in black around, or you get the Air Force spreading rumors or discrediting people. It's kind of an interesting era for that, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. And you're absolutely right. Again, from this same report, the historian notes that the Air Force and CIA actually made misleading and deceptive statements to the public in order to allay fears and to protect secret and extraordinary kind of military tech that they're working on. Half of the sightings, the UFO sightings from the 1950s and 60s, were probably reconnaissance aircraft that were secret to the public.
Yeah, like the F-117, like all these reconnaissance aircraft that are iconic. At the time, they were being developed, and the government was trying to hide that from the Soviets so they wouldn't get a leg up in this arms race.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So let's get to the myth, the narrative, the idea of being visited by well-tailored suited and sunglass-wearing government agents. I imagine the movie took some creative liberties with that. But this idea gets born there, and then the public runs with it. They start thinking there are these shadowy government figures who show up in suits who are sort of government fixers. They make things disappear to cover up the aliens.
Exactly. But we need one person here to develop our narrative, because actually the movie Men in Black took way fewer liberties than you might imagine, because the real inventor of the cultural idea of the Men in Black is a guy named Gray Barker. And he was huge in the UFO community, especially in the 1950s and 60s. He hangs out, he's still active into the early 80s when he dies of a heart attack, but he's really big in the 50s and 60s. And it is really from him that we get this cultural sense of who the Men in Black are that is a bit different from the way that the original idea of maybe somebody from the intelligence community will pay you a visit if you've discovered something you shouldn't have. This sort of more embellished story comes back to him. He's a grifter. He is a scammer. He's a jokester. He's somebody who does this kind of stuff for fun. And what happened specifically, this is the beginning of the story, is that a friend of his, a guy named Albert K. Bender, he begins a citizen sleuth UFO investigation bureau called the IFSB, the International Flying Saucer Bureau. And this is going to be citizens who go out and investigate flying saucers because, you can't trust the government to do it. So Bender starts this organization, but he puts Gray Barker as the chief investigator. And from that moment on, Barker starts to troll Bender, and he starts to say all these kinds of things that are happening to him, that is to say to Gray Barker, and he then creates a scenario in which the Bender, the guy who created the organization, is in fact visited by members of a shadowy organization, and this scares him so much that not even a year after beginning this organization, he shuts up shop and you never hear from him again.
Interesting. Any idea where he went, or he just kind of stayed silent?
He got scared. So he sticks around, but he stops investigating UFOs and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. And it's because of what this kind of prank that Barker plays on him.
So it adds fuel to the fire. There must be Men in Black if these people talking about it just stop talking about it. We're here talking about the origins of Men in Black, the movie, with Dr. Lee Kuhnle. It's Conspiracy Corner. When we come back, we'll discuss more what Gray Barker claimed about the quote-unquote real Men in Black, which gave fuel to the fire.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
It's Conspiracy Corner. We are joined by Dr. Lee Kuhnle talking the origins of Men in Black. There are stories in the United States that date back, 70, 80 years, claiming of shadowy government figures, covering things up, hiding the truth about UFOs from us. Lee, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So this character, Gray Barker, he teams up with someone who has a legitimate curiosity in figuring out who these Men in Black are. What's going on when the government tries to cover up things because they can't be trusted. But Gray Barker is a grifter. He makes stuff up.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And look, I don't like grifters as a group of people on the whole, but nonetheless, I feel like I have some kind of affinity for Gray Barker, who seems to, at least from his perspective, be doing it with a bit of a glint in his eye and a little bit of a cheeky smile, and probably at the time in the 1950s and 60s does not believe he's doing anything harmful. He changes his mind by the 1980s when he sees how a really kind of dark element is starting to emerge in the UFO community and how a lot of his stuff is being taken very seriously. But in the 50s, like the kind of stuff that he would do is he would hang a UFO model off the end of a fishing rod, and they would take pictures, and these would become the iconic pictures in the UFO community in the 1950s. And he would be there at these conferences, very straight-faced, and talking about how scary it was to encounter this and what a thrill and all of that kind of stuff. And so this is who Gray Barker is. Like, he was not a serious investigator. He was also not somebody who had been taken in by somebody else. He was somebody who thought the entire thing was hilariously funny. I have a quote somewhere from a letter of his that he wrote to his protege, John Shermer, and I'll get to him in a moment.
You got to admire a guy who's just a troll having fun with it and then realizes that he's created this monster. People are believing this stuff. Their lives are being consumed by this stuff. And he realizes, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that all along.
Yeah, he has a really dark poem. That's one of the last things he wrote before he died of a heart attack. And I can't even say the title of the poem on air. And it's all about how the UFO community is just full of idiots and it's sewage and waste of humanity. It's a really dark, position. But in this letter that he writes to his protege, he talks about belief in UFOs. These are his words, obviously, not mine. He says it, quote, represents a definite symptom of neurosis. And he can't bear that most of these people believe this kind of nonsense. So this is him writing in the 60s at the time that he's perpetrating a lot of these hoaxes, right? So this isn't just, me trying to cherry pick a little bit of data and saying, well, the Men in Black aren't real. It's that when we go to the source of the story and we look at his letters and his correspondences with friends and family members, there is this other side that emerges.
And this narrative kind of exists to this day. Like, we all kind of believe in the back of our heads we might get visited by men in suits who disappear us or disappear whatever we are working on, maybe steal evidence we have or cover up research we're doing. Like, we all believe this is a plausible thing because of these narratives.
Exactly. And again, I think if you were to put this into some kind of Venn diagram of what we imagine that we get from narrative, and then what any secret service is obviously going to do in order to keep, its military secrets safe, there's going to be a lot of overlap of those two Venn spaces. I'm sorry, I've gotten already out of my depth
Circles.
Very quickly, but there's a lot of overlap there. So you can always sort of find evidence for the truth of your story in real events that happen that are, similar enough to the narrative events. But we know, right, that all of this, well, first of all, he wrote all of this down in what was actually a New York Times bestseller book in the 1950s, and it's called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And it's, again, this kind of paranoid vision of what happens. The government is trying to keep it secret, and if you spill the beans, somebody's going to talk to you about it. But we know today that he knew that it was fiction. largely because of one last character we have to introduce into the story. And this is a guy named John C. Sherwood. And he is a protege of Gray Barker. So Gray Barker, among other things, is, publishing articles and books. And this kid wants to become a journalist. And Barker helps him get a book published at the age of 17. He has written effectively a sci-fi book about an alien abduction. Barker reads it and says, this would work way better if you pretended it was a nonfiction book, which he does with the help, some editorial help of Gray Barker, and then gets a book published at the age of 17. And this launches him into his journalistic career. And he still hangs out with Barker throughout the 60s and maybe into the 70s, but they kind of lose touch, and he becomes just an actual journalist and is not a player in the UFO community. And then in 1998, he is in a movie theater with his wife, and a trailer comes on for the Men in Black film that we know with John Lee and Will Smith. And he is shocked at seeing Gray Barker's fantasy almost plagiarized. It was like right out of the book. It was like they're working with the aliens. They have alien technology. Some of the Men in Black are, in fact, themselves aliens. Their main job is to shut down any discussion of UFOs within the UFO sleuth and conspiracy communities, to find out what's going on, to steal their evidence, maybe to disappear them. Occasionally, some people will get the truth. And so he is sitting there watching this entire thing unfold and develops a really guilty conscience because, he's turned into a legit journalist now. I mean, and he was at the origin of creating this myth. He was there when Barker was doing this stuff. He helped contribute to it with his own book. He helped Barker with other kind of scams and grifts that he was perpetrating. And so he then writes a couple of tell-all articles, including one that I'm citing heavily from for our little chat in Skeptical Inquirer and other places like this, where he just basically narrates how they perpetrated the entire fiction, how it is that this was actually from the mind of Gray Barker, how this really didn't have anything to do with anything that was really happening, despite the fact that we've noted that occasionally it does happen, but that this was Barker's creation with the help of some of his friends.
And of course, no one takes notice, and
Well, exactly. I mean, somewhere, and I wish I could come up with a quote. Some theorists sometime had said, a myth is a fictional story that's forgotten its origin.
Yeah.
And this was also the title of Shermer's tell-all apology, was The Making of a Myth. Barker's making of the myth of the Men in Black.
I'm convinced that the flat earthers were just like a group of people trolling who didn't actually believe it. And then you get people who actually buy into the conspiracy and talk about it on YouTube, like every pilot's in on it, every airline's in on it. This can happen where a conspiracy starts as a joke or an exaggeration or a publicity stunt or just a bunch of guys having fun. And then it just completely gets taken and misused and believed.
Exactly. And I give you a perfect example. This happened with Birds Aren't Real, which you and I will remember that it started as a joke. And I remember saying at the time, I'm sure there will come a time where the original joke of this will be forgotten. And it happened this year for the first time in my class. We were banding about what topics are you interested in discussing in the world of conspiracy theories. In 2 different classes, a student put up their hand, asked about what about Birds Aren't Real. I asked, do you know it's a joke? No. They had forgotten. It's gone now. The joke is gone, and all we are left with is the conspiracy.
Well, if you're listening to this on the radio and the next time you hear this show, I'm suspiciously not around and Dr. Lee Kuhnle is suspiciously not around, you'll know Men in Black are in fact real. Dr. Lee Kuhnle is a political science professor at Humber Polytechnic. He co-hosts the Uncover Up podcast. Check that out on whatever podcast platform you'd like. Lee, thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, David.
After the break, we'll cover the mental health topic of the week, sleep hygiene. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, broadcasting's only therapy-related segment, intended for a Thursday that airs on a Wednesday. I am David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
When your therapist therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
It might be the 1,000th time I say this, but I am going to describe the single biggest thing that I have done, the single best thing I have done to improve my mental health. And it's not some wild secret. It's not a medication. It's not therapy. It's not being here every week with Gary Direnfeld, therapist, social worker, and expert in marital therapy on Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. It's plugging my phone in away from the bed. It's the most boring thing, but it's helped me so much, and we're here to tell you why. Gary, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you. We're going to get into the practice of sleep. And you're right. It's great for mental health.
I used to, even when I wasn't on my phone, if I had it plugged in on my night table, just it being there meant that I could look at it to see the time, to check, oh, I meant to send this, or oh, what's my first meeting, or oh. And so just the very fact my phone was there, my brain knew I could grab it. Often I didn't, but when I did, I could be up at all hours of night. Having the phone removed from the bed, away from the bed, has just, it's turned like when the lights are out and the TV's off, there's nothing there. It's just sleep mode.
You're reminding me of a workshop I gave to grade 10 students at a high school. I said, show of hands, or blurt things out. What are some of the things you're grappling with? What would you like me to talk about as a social worker? And several of the students said they're always tired. I said, show of hands, how many of you is that an issue for? And it, just from the show of hands, and there had to be close to 100 students in this auditorium, 90% must have raised their hands. They're all fatigued.
Yeah.
And then I said, how many of you sleep with your cell phone, smartphone, within a foot of your head? That pretty much same 90% raised their hand.
Yeah.
Then there was this one young student, a woman, a girl, and she raises her hand. I said, what is it? She says, I'm not tired.
Yeah.
Like almost as a defiance. I said, okay, why not? And then she says, my mother won't let me take my phone into my room. Boom. So I don't tell these students what to do. I just draw the parallels between behavior and outcome. And I said, well, guys, there you go. If you don't want to be fatigued, that's something you may want to look at.
When I tell people this who complain about being on their phone all night, doom scrolling, being on social media, like TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, even Reddit, even just browsing news sites, you're going through this dopamine cycle of, if it's a news site, headline, oh, this headline's interesting, or this politician did that, or oh, this disaster happened. It's like a little bit of adrenaline or dopamine or whatever. It keeps your mind active. And just knowing that it's there for me, not even going on it, but knowing that it's there, that I have access to it, it keeps me up. Since I started plugging my phone in away from the bed, I used to do it in the other room in my old place. In my new place, I do it 15 feet from the bed and the farthest plug in the room. Maybe 10 feet. It's New York. It's not a big room.
As long as it's out of reach.
Yes. And the double is that when the alarm on the phone goes off in the morning, I have to physically get out of bed to shut it off. And that act of getting out of bed wakes me up rather than the snooze cycle, which is the worst thing you can be in. This okay, I got to get up at 8:30. I mean, my first meeting's at 10, but I should probably prepare for it. And so I set the alarm at 8:30. It goes off. Oh, I got 10 more minutes to nap. Oh, I got 10 more minutes to nap. Then you've stayed in bed and you've ruined your potential for that good hour, and you're up late anyway, which is admittedly what happened to me this morning. I was late for a meeting.
Just to our listeners, it's no wonder we're talking about this today. We're picking up on one of David Cooper's issues.
Yes. I get it. I'm Canadian. I live in New York. You're Canadian. Obviously, Monday night, I was up late. I wanted to see the election results.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Tuesday, I was brain dead. It happens. But try not to. Sleep is everything to do with my mental health and mood states and my outlook. It all stems from getting good sleep. And I know that can sound trivial or silly, but
No.
sleep is fundamental.
It is fundamental. Myself as a social worker, I go over so many issues with anyone who sits in front of me. I'm retired, anyone who had sat in front of me, and including, do you sleep? So, if you're having trouble with your partner, managing the kids, getting to work, dealing with your workload, are you sleeping? And if you aren't, why not? So when we talk about sleep hygiene, we wonder, is that phone within a foot of your head? Is there a television in the bedroom? What time do you go to bed? Do you consume alcohol in the evening or other substances? When was your last cup of coffee? And so even though a social worker, sometimes the solution isn't about how you're going to get along with others. It's about how you're going to get a good night's sleep. And it's amazing how many problems can be resolved with that sleep.
I agree. And I think a lot of people have to realize insomnia, it's a real thing. You could be laying in bed all night, but at least set up an environment where you can sleep that's dark, that's silent, where there's no technology or blue light from screens. And if you're still up till 5 a.m., like a lot of people think they have insomnia, but they're unwilling to try going off the phone, or unwilling to try laying in bed and just focusing on the breathing, in 1, 2, out 1, 2, try to just relax, picture yourself on a beach, like all these kind of woo-woo hypnosis kind of things. Just try.
One of the biggest blowbacks I get from people is, oh, I tried that. It doesn't work for me. I said, well, how often did you try it? Once. No. No. Literally, learning to sleep is, for some, it's a skill to be mastered. And with any of these strategies and techniques, it doesn't happen miraculously in one shot. These are things that you have to, in a sense, retrain your body, retrain your brain through practice over time.
On the one hand, when people say, I just can't sleep, I'm up all night, my thoughts are swirling, the narrative I tell about myself is I'm an insomniac and I'm just always underslept and it affects my moods and there's nothing I can do about it. The thing is, that used to be me. I used to act like I was a victim, and I used to think that I was a victim of insomnia. And through making changes, I am cured. I don't have that narrative about myself that I'm a bad sleeper, that existential dread keeps me up all night.
Yes.
I don't want to like diminish or downplay or invalidate those who are actual insomniacs who do everything right and still lay in bed sleepless.
Fair enough.
But I think a lot of people think that about themselves, and if they made the changes, they would see that they're not that way.
Correct. They'd have a better outcome. It doesn't preclude there will be a small number of persons for whom medication can be helpful too. I do remember in the 1990s, I had to work with this fellow who I had to manage, and he was so undermining, yet he was 20 years older than me, and he had higher degrees than me. And so it was an issue. It was a challenge for me. He would make a bonehead move, and I would lose that night's sleep and the next night's sleep. And I would say to myself, I'll never sleep again. But by the third or fourth night, of course, I'd be so whacked out that, of course, I'm going to fall asleep. But a solution would come to me. And the solution was always confronting the person and addressing the issue. For that, I had to overcome things. But I want to tell you one of my learnings.
Okay, when we come back, we'll get Gary's learnings from dealing with someone more senior to him at work or something. I'm trying to think how do we make this exciting when we come back?
Well, yeah, someone with whom I had difficulty managing.
Professional conflict turns into sleep solutions with Gary Direnfeld here.
Oh, that's good.
Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. I know, that's why I'm here.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your nightly dose of unfiltered opinions and unexpected conversations. Unexpected Conversations. The Last Show with David Cooper.
I love that.
I love it too. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Gary Direnfeld is here. We are talking personal experiences with sleep hygiene. For me, a major change was I got my cell phone away from the bed and just really set myself up for success. Dark room, no television, no blue light, earplugs, pillow over my eyes. Used to sleep with an eye mask, prefer pillow over the eyes. Dark room, the whole 9 yards. And I have rewired my brain and rewired the narrative I tell about myself from being an insomniac who's a victim, who can't sleep, who's always brain dead, to someone with decent sleep hygiene. Gary, welcome back.
So I was telling this story about this person I had to manage who was older than myself, more professional credentials, yet I had to manage him, and he kept trying to undermine me. I would lose sleep. That would go on for 3 or 4 days until I found the solution. But in those 3 or 4 days, I would say to myself, I'll never sleep again, right? This negative self-talk. What I learned to do was if I can't sleep on a particular night, I get out of bed and I wind up doing something that's actually productive so that I at least have something positive to show for my lack of sleep. So even though I'm tired the next day, I still feel good about myself. That was one thing that changed for me. The other thing that changed for me is recognizing I have to confront that which needs my attention. I can't run from it. I can't be afraid of it. I have to set limits, boundaries, and expectations for others, and therein I will find my peace. And honestly, that was a challenge for me. I was in my late 30s, early 40s. He was a man in his 60s, and I had to take him on, and I did that. And after that, I actually slept quite well. So the message to people, sleep hygiene, it can be about the device we take to bed, the television that's in the room, the drugs or alcohol that we're consuming in the evening, the caffeine through the day. And of course, it could be stressful matters that we're trying to deal with. And last but not least, there are medical conditions.
I'm on 2 medications that assist with sleep, so I'll get to that in a second. But you mentioned if you're really in bed tossing and turning and the lights are out and you've done everything right and something is really stressing you out, getting out of bed and doing a little bit of work so you have something to show for it. My way of dealing with that is if I really feel I need to be on my phone, if I really feel a relaxing sitcom from the 90s will make me more in the mood to sleep, I get out of the bed and I go watch TV on my phone on the couch for half an hour, and then I go back to bed. So the bed, as my old therapist said, the bed is for 2 things, sleeping and just kind of keeping it as a safe space.
Yes.
Where it's like, if you go there, it's to sleep. If you go there, your mind's in sleep mode. And if you're not in sleep mode, get out of there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Use it for the use that it was intended for. And there's a paradox. The more we fight to sleep, the less we sleep. So I surrender. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to get up. I'm going to putter. I'm going to do something. Sleep eventually comes. And then we can have that bit of rest.
From my era where I was an insomniac, I got put on 2 medications, like mood stabilizer, psychiatric medications that make you a little drowsy. They're part of my bedtime ritual. I don't even really think about it anymore. I've been on them and my dose is kind of low. Medication can help. I don't know how I would sleep without them. I've been on them so long and I find them so helpful that, my medication, after tweaking a little bit over a long period of time, I'm kind of on a good mix of stuff that really works for me.
Yeah, if you have been prescribed an anti-anxiety medication or an antidepressant medication, we do want to look at some of the side effects. And some of the side effects can be to make you awake. Some of them can be to make you drowsy. And so we want to kind of track that because it can suggest a better time of day for the administration of that medication.
Any other tips or tricks? Like, what do you do when unresolved conflict?
I'll tell you, many men, some of the women argue this one, but many of the men will masturbate. that you're laughing.
No, it's helpful. I have been known to do.
But for many a person, that's a stress reliever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm laughing because it was just such a dramatic U-turn from what we were talking about. I mean, it's good advice, like if you're
look, it's within the range of options. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, because that is helpful for some persons. Well, we're talking about sex. What can I do?
For me and my girlfriend, it's encouraged to leave the bed to do it because, with her, the toys vibrate. And for me, the bed shakes. I guess you're a therapist. I guess this has educational value. So I guess what we're doing right now is not inappropriate.
No. Look, all of this is about human life. And human life.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It is good advice. It is a stress reliever. You get your brain releases calming, sleepy chemicals.
You remind me of some of the conversations about sex with children. Many a child will laugh through the information. There's an unease about talking about some of these subjects, but that's okay. We still go there.
Sex and flatulence are just two inherently funny things.
Yeah.
Farts are always funny. It's an amazing thing. We get this gift every day. I mean, for me, it's 20, 30 times a day. I have IBS. For people, it's less. But, it's just this funny thing.
Pull my finger.
You're 4 years old, man. It's a good strategy. For, as long as you're not, I don't know, some couples have weird stuff around that, it's like if the other partner masturbates, they get mad, or they like to know about it.
Fair enough.
I don't really understand that, but just, don't, if your wife or husband is not expecting it and it would be jarring for them, don't have them wake up to you doing that. It might be surprising.
That's good advice, good instruction, David. I am just throwing it out there because it is amongst the things that someone can do for themselves that can relieve stress. It's not harmful. You're not going to go to hell over it.
Some people believe that.
I know. I don't follow that. Just like getting the smartphone away from your bedside, turning off the TV, and limiting drugs and alcohol in the evening. We wrap all of this around the subject of sleep hygiene. And, it seems weird putting the word hygiene beside sleep, but that's what we refer to this as.
Any other practices? Like for me, focusing on the breathing when I'm super stressed, like when I'm laying there and the thoughts of the next day and the meeting and all the things that are going to go wrong because they always do. That's the way I think when I'm stressed.
Listen, the positive side of having your smartphone is that there are apps available to take you through guided imagery, relaxation strategies that many people do find helpful as well. They do, but for me, there's a certain irony, like the very thing that is keeping you up. There's an app for it. It's like I don't know. So it's not necessarily the phone that's bad, but how we use it. Sure. And so if you can use it in a way that's constructive to help you fall asleep, so be it. Then use it. I agree. If, however, it is that distraction limiting your sleep, get it the hell out of the room. I agree with you in theory, and I know these meditative apps or sleep helping apps or whatever they are great, and people love them and swear by them. But for me, there's something so silly about the very thing that keeps you up, the social media, the blue light, the technology, the distraction of it. Oh, the irony. Is the thing that's going to help you find whatever. I don't agree with it. Gary, what a pleasure this was. Freeform, personal, helpful, stream of consciousness odyssey about sleep hygiene. I appreciate you being on the show. Always a pleasure. You can find Gary Direnfeld at yoursocialworker.com. Up next, have you heard any of the following? Honey, I'm not in the mood. I've had a long day. Maybe tomorrow. You've been the victim of sexual deflection. We'll cover how not to feel disappointed when your advances are, deflected. It's salacious, sexy content on the other side of the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that makes you laugh, think, and occasionally uncomfortable. The Last Show with David Cooper.
You're in a committed relationship and you want to do sex with your partner, as it is said. You want changes in your sex life. You want something different and you need a conversation. But every time that conversation, you try to have it, deflection, rejection, the topic changes. That's what we're going to discuss here on Sex Etc. with Samantha Bitty. Samantha, welcome in, and hello to you and other things I probably haven't said yet.
Hello.
You have a great podcast called What Would Samantha Bitty Do? And people send you questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you answer them. One of those questions is how to deal with sexual rejection in a monogamous framework. And I love this because I feel like I've been there, at times in life where it's like you want to have a conversation and anytime it comes up, the topic somehow changes.
Yeah, I loved the question because, the way it was phrased was like, it took a lot of ownership, this question. It's like, how do I manage my own disappointment when every time I bring up sex or I want to have sex, my partner deflects, right? And I think that there's kind of like two parts to it. So first and foremost, acknowledging the fact that committed relationship is not consent, right? Like we are not entitled to anybody's body or time or any of those things, right? And this is a really valuable posture to take. However, when we are in relationship, there are agreements that we make around the ways in which we're going to show up to each other. And a really core value in relationship, in order to have sustainable, fulfilling relationship, is reciprocity. And ultimately, I believe like compatibility around things like, this is important to me and I want to talk about it, and someone being available to have those conversations. And sometimes it needs to be facilitated, like perhaps you need a coach or a counselor. That's part of the work that I do, is helping couples and people to facilitate more challenging conversations. We all come into these types of things with different skill sets. And ultimately what we're talking about is rejection, right? And how do we build more capacity around rejection, as well as navigate, well, is this a sustainable dynamic for us?
I like that too. Someone taking ownership, like what can I do? Rather than, my partner is doing this. But sometimes this can be tough, right? Like when there's no one time that you can pinpoint where you were rejected or someone deflected. Maybe they were just busy that day, or maybe they did just have a rough day at work, or maybe they're got in a fight with their mother. I don't know why I said that. Coincidentally, my mother just visited me in New York. It has nothing to do with that. But that can be the tough thing. Like when there's no one time when you're trying to have that conversation with your partner that they deflected, but it's the sum of all those little times. You know what I'm saying?
When it becomes like the culture of your relationship that you have one person initiating sex or initiating the tougher conversations, or the idea that, there's some needs here not being met. How do we navigate this? And when we have these dynamics where there's one who is initiating and one who is withdrawing, it's really challenging.
I once took a nice vacation with Miranda. We went to one of these nice successive meals with the dessert, whatever. And we were both feeling flirty that night, And so when we were about to get busy, she just said to me, "I can't tonight, honey. I've had a big dinner." And now that's just like a joke we say to each other when neither of us isn't in the mood for whatever reason. Maybe it was a rough day at work, maybe just not in the mood. We say, "I've had a big dinner." I don't think we've gotten to the point where the "I've had a big dinner" joke is what we say all the time and never have sex. But I feel like little things like that can accumulate in couples, where it's just like little tiny rejections. Like all I need to say is I had a rough day at work. And then that signals to my partner, I don't want to have sex and I won't talk about it. I feel like little things can build up. And how do you approach it? And how do you approach it from the lens of, I got to own this for me?
I actually find that really amusing, because you and I have talked before about the importance of, if you're on a date or you have date plans and there is the intention to smash, that the smashing happens before the meal.
It's called the first Valentine's. And that's, the classic Valentine's meal is the French food or whatever, and the chocolate dessert, and the wine if you drink, and it's just like so much. And then at the end of the night, like, who wants to smash after that? So what you do is you do it before the nice Valentine's dinner. Then you eat, you gorge, and there's no pressure. That can be applied to any date. It doesn't just have to be Valentine's.
Absolutely. I think it was important that we give homage to that conversation. I think we're probably one of our first ever conversations together back in the day. But to answer the question, I think that, if I'm coaching a couple, which this is a really common problem or a common issue between partners, the idea that there is what we call like desire discrepancy within the partnership, whether that is frequency or time of day or whatever it is. And firstly, neutralizing the idea that anyone is entitled to sex within a partnership. That said, both partners' needs are equally valid. And so the ways in which I would help a couple to navigate this, which again requires both parties to be willing to show up to the conversation, is okay, what is the core need not being met? Is it the actual sexual pleasure, like sexual activity? Or is it notions of intimacy or what we feel like the lack of sex or the lack of desire for sex or even the deflection itself? What is that indicating to me? How does that make me feel? And how can we meet each other somewhere in the middle where there is compassion for both sides? So how do we practice intimacy in other ways? And this is the part that everybody hates, where I'm like, okay, it might require you scheduling the conversation and setting a timer and all of this kind of like relationship bureaucracy, which everyone's like, I don't want to do that. It's not sexy. It's not fun. And it's like, well, the whole idea that relationships are sexy and fun is a fairy tale. It is something that is pop culture media. When you're actually in the thick of it, it requires intention, especially the longer we are with folks.
So putting all media portrayals aside, spreadsheets are sexy is what you're telling me.
I mean, I'm polyamorous. So if there isn't a calendar or a spreadsheet or what, polyamory is about shaving my getting broken up with and navigating Google Calendar. Scheduling is
the 3 tenets of polyamory.
Scheduling is 90% of my polyamory, and it is annoying because I am very not that person.
I get it. Creative work. I have this theory that all creative work taken seriously enough somehow ends up in spreadsheets. I believe that deeply. Whether you're a graphic artist, whether you're a singer, it doesn't matter. If you're a painter, eventually, if you take it seriously enough, you're going to get your stuff in a gallery, however small, and then what pieces get sold get managed by a spreadsheet. I think all creative stuff, and maybe all sexual stuff, if it's taken seriously enough for long enough, it'll end up in a spreadsheet.
I'm so much more of a 20% plan, 80% do, or 5% plan, 95% do. But, to kind of bring it back on track, what I would say is something that I find interesting here was this notion of I'm monogamous, so I can't access sex elsewhere. But I believe that this still applies across relationship orientation. If you are in a partnership, a committed partnership, or any kind of, partnership, not that sex is the most important thing. It definitely is not. But if there are these pieces of rejection, if there are these pieces of a lack of compatibility, if there are these pieces where intimacy is missing or being missed, it doesn't matter if you can someone else. The focus is on that union and that partnership. And so my advice around this is, yes, manage your disappointment, develop the capacity to experience rejection. And also the other person, I believe, for sustainability and fulfillment, also needs to show up at least to communicate, this is why I'm having difficulty even having the conversation. And can we talk about this? Can we check back in about it in 4 weeks or whatever it is?
Samantha, thank you.
Thanks.
You can find Samantha at Samantha_Bitty on Instagram. She's a sexual health and consent educator based out of Toronto, Canada. Speaking of Toronto, a city first up next, an ASMR spa. You know that hypnotic, relaxing thing you get when you hear certain dulcet tones? Probably not my voice. We'll cover that on the other side of the break.
Part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Whiskers, wig brushing, full body tingles. Welcome to the world of ASMR. Joining me is Tammy Lung, the founder of Tingles Bar, the first ASMR spa in Toronto. We're going to talk about internet oddities, what these videos are, and how to turn them into real-life relaxation at a spa. Tammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those who don't know, what is an ASMR video? I've seen them online. Admittedly, I don't find them as relaxing as some people, but there is something a little odd about them where you just sort of listen to them, watch them, and feel a little bit relaxed. Tell me what they are.
Yeah, so I think to start, ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, and it's a term that describes a kind of tingly, sleepy sensation that washes over you in response to audio or visual stimuli. So a lot of people, we're talking millions in the community, are watching videos online of different forms of content that trigger that ASMR feeling.
I watch cooking videos and I find like mixing eggs but you have to mic it in a certain way. Like if I do a cooking video, it's not going to sound like that.
Yeah, so, there are people that use high-level equipment to produce their content, but there's also a whole subsector of ASMR content referred to as unintentional ASMR, where it's just like everyday happenings that also happen to elicit that response. So there are tons of branches of ASMR. Like you mentioned, there's food content, there's role play content, there's slime and oddly satisfying content. And what is happening is essentially the viewer is feeling, depending on the content, they're either feeling relaxed by watching it or they're feeling cared for. And that's more so related to the personal attention types of role play content where the creator is pretending to speak to the viewer or perform some sort of service on the viewer virtually. And that viewer is receiving that ASMR through that exchange.
Millions of people watch these things, enjoy these things, get that response. But before there was a label on this, before there was an ASMR label and you guys kind of understood what the stuff was, I imagine you liked it at a young age and kind of didn't know what it was.
Yeah, that's exactly how I kind of got started with it and exposed to it. I grew up watching a lot of shopping channel makeup tutorials where they would sell makeup products and they would demo it on the model. And I would watch this and feel super relaxed for some reason. I also watched a lot of art shows. There was a show called Art Attack, and many are familiar with Bob Ross, The Joy of Painting.
Yes.
It's also one of the programs that a lot of people's first experience with ASMR comes from. And so it was a relaxing feeling that many people were experiencing but didn't know how to describe. A couple decades ago, there was a forum where people were talking about it and describing it as this brain orgasm or brain massage, this tingly sensation that they felt when watching certain types of content. And then it was later coined ASMR by a woman named Jennifer Allen.
I know I said at the beginning of the interview I don't respond to it, but I watch Bob Ross to go to bed. So maybe I do respond to it. Let's take this idea, this concept, you watching videos online, and then you start thinking, maybe I can make a business out of this. Maybe I can make a spa out of this.
Yes.
Walk me through how that decision gets made.
Yeah, so like I've said, I've been a fan of ASMR even before I knew what it was. And I would look up videos specifically of people, giving others massages or brushing people's hair. And I've always wanted something like that for myself. And I've noticed on the videos I was watching in the comment section, people were kind of echoing that same desire to have something like that in real life. So I looked for a space or a spa in the city and beyond, and I could never find one that offered specifically ASMR services. So I decided to just launch it myself. And I started as a couple pop-up events a few years ago in downtown Toronto. It sold out. And so clearly there was some demand for it in the city. And last year I decided to open up an official spa where we offered these ASMR inspired services 7 days a week with a full team.
What are the services the team provides? If I walk in, like, what am I doing? I'm lying on a table and somebody's playing with like wrapping paper. What's exactly going on?
Yeah, so the great thing about what we do is it's a completely bespoke experience. We really try to tailor it to what triggers work for each client because it's so different and every individual has different triggers. But at our very core experience, which we like to, it's a 60-minute session that we use as an introductory experience. So it will incorporate a little bit of everything, which is hair play, scalp massage, back scratching, face brushing, different types of relaxation services using a variety of techniques and tools that, again, elicit that tingly ASMR feeling.
So if I come in and I don't get the feeling from the noise, the tingling, the fingling, there's a backup plan. I get a scalp massage. I get to relax, even if I don't respond to the ASMR specifically.
Yeah, we default to what we are confident that the general public will enjoy. Everyone likes a back scratch. Everyone likes a head massage. A lot of our guests come in because they find traditional massage therapy to be a little bit painful. So when they're laying on a massage table, they're constantly bracing for pain and they're never really letting go or feeling completely relaxed. So with our services, they come in knowing everything's very light touch, everything's very delicate. They can totally unwind and totally just immerse themselves in the sensory experience.
I got to hand it to you. In today's economy, I hate when people say that, but in today's economy, running a niche business is like rough, and yet you're doing okay. What's been the biggest surprise for you about the success of Tingle's Bar?
I think a lot of people nowadays, especially after the whole pandemic of not being able to touch each other, people are craving human connection and physical touch. And it's also, we talked a lot about how this originated from our childhoods when our moms would brush our hair or scratch our back going to sleep. And we lose that sense of care and comfort as we become adults. And so we're kind of providing this space where you can re-experience those sensations and that sense of comfort and soothingness that we don't really get very often anymore.
So I wasn't touched a lot as a child. That sounded weird. But like my parents, I wasn't hugged a lot. And as an adult, I don't really like massages and stuff. Do you ever get people in who like just don't like the experience? Like what happens then?
No, I honestly say, and we kind of pride ourselves on this, is we have never had a client leave feeling bad. They always left feeling better than when they came in. And I think, these are all nice things. It's really hard to step away from the experience not feeling good because they're receiving this altruistic care and attention. And it just feels nice.
Yeah. And you interview these people to figure out what they want beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. And we really customize it to what they like. And we take notes of what triggers they preferred most so that if they do come to visit again, it's refined experiences each visit.
Before we started this interview, I was kind of feeling skeptical. And then you mentioned Bob Ross. And then I thought, you know what? I actually do like this stuff without realizing it. What would you say to someone who's a skeptic about ASMR kind of stuff?
It's so different with everyone. I think I would encourage to watch different forms of ASMR content to find what triggers you. Or just start with like what typically feels good, like what makes you feel good. And I'm sure there are many triggers that will help elicit that same feeling you get from things you like and enjoy.
My cat purring, now that I think about it.
And that is a perfect trigger. Lots of people like cat purrs.
Well, Tammy Lung is the owner of Tingle's Bar, an ASMR spa in Toronto. Check it out at tinglesbar.com. Tammy, thanks for talking to me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is the show. Thank you for tuning into it. If you liked anything you heard tonight, you can catch the last show as a podcast. Or if you're going to miss a night of the show, catch up by listening to the podcast. I said that twice. Just go to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. And there you can find out more info about our podcast and follow us on social media. Hope you have a wonderful late evening. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.